to come back to down by the riverside and the question of the boat. Y'all are really hard on Bob for stealing this boat. Remember, we learn more about the boats as time goes on in the story. That by the time they get to the hospital, the army people are amazed that they have a boat because all of the boats have been requisitioned by the army. So there are no boats. This has been the only boat. And by saying that all of the boats in town have been requisitioned, it's also implied that the postmaster, and now I've forgotten his name, Hartfield, has somehow avoided having his boat requisitioned by the army.
He's hidden it.
Right, which raises the question of whether he's hidden his boat from the army. So is Hartfield also being immoral in this situation by not doing his part and giving his boat to the army?
That's like people who used to hide their horses when the army would requisition them.
Right.
Or
that's a different Faulkner novel. It's a different Faulkner story. There's a character who does that, who's a horse wrangler. Right, so maybe Hartfield has hidden his boat from the army. Because it sounds like, from what unfolds at the hospital, the only possibility for rescue now is when the army sends a motorboat out to get somebody, which they only do after the levee breaks. That's when they go rescue the Hartfields, because now they have a spare boat because they don't have to be at the levee anymore because there is no levee. So yes, Bob has stolen the boat in that he hasn't paid somebody to use it, but there's also a question of why that person had the boat to begin with. And then the added fact of everyone telling us, even before the first encounter, that Hartfield particularly does not like black people more than other people in the town who are racist. Hartfield is more racist. So even if Bob had tried to ask for the boat, he would have been denied. And I don't know that I would rate that as a betrayal, that Bob stole the boat for a brother man.
Having been desperate enough to steal a metaphorical boat, I don't hold it against him. You gotta do what you gotta do.
Right, it's for survival. He's doing...
It's not like he stole it because he wanted to go fishing.
Right, it's not like he stole it and then left them and was, peace out, I'm going to the hills by myself. It was, he did what he had to do to try and save them in this situation.
Even if he pocketed some of the money.
Even if he pocketed some of the money. But at the same time, it's an old mule. And who were they probably selling it to?
Exactly.
Probably to the white people, and they're in the middle of this flood. So it's also a who has how much cash on hand situation. I think the real betrayal in that story is from Hartfield's wife and child, the son.
I think the son. I don't think the wife was...
Well, she backs it up.
She does, but...
But definitely the son. And the commander from the hospital says, well, he was real helpful, but then can't do anything to intervene.
I think that's more of a betrayal than the son, because the son, I feel like he has more of a reason to get vengeance on
right.
Brother Man.
You have to avenge your father. That's what he expects. He expects that to happen. So really, maybe that isn't a betrayal either, because that's the story that's supposed to happen. And Brother Man knows it's going to happen unless somehow he escapes.
The soldier or the commander says, I will not forget you, I'll remember you.
Right.
And, I'll try to help you out. And then he just does nothing.
family had said, hey, okay, dad shot first.
A life for a
so
life.
this is fine.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and you saved us from drowning in
Yeah.
a terrible death.
But it was definitely the commander that-
Who's the real betrayal? And I think this is the first system. I mean, it's the second story in the collection, but this is where we see Wright looking at oppression and racism as part of a system, and as at people as actors within a system, because the commander is positioned as someone who is in power, but in a certain type of power and outside of the community. That the commander has power and the army has power over punishment and law to a certain extent, but there's also the rule of the community, of the local community, and then the rules of white supremacy here, that there is no time, there is no time because of the situation of the flood and everyone being refugees essentially at this point. But that justice is a foregone conclusion in this instance, that there is no necessity for a trial because the white witnesses have spoken, and that's the condemnation, that's the guilty verdict. It doesn't matter if Brother Man admitted to it or not. The commander in this position, though, I think sees that the most that he can do, or thinks that the most he can do, and also the least he can do, is try to give Brother Man some sort of dignified death. Because he is trying to protect him against the lynch mob. He's saying, look, buddy, you've got to die either way, but we'll try and have you have a military execution rather than leave you to the whims of the mob, which is what'll happen if we don't have these soldiers escort you, or if we don't take care of this now.
Do you find this story oppositional to the way that To Kill a Mockingbird is, because it's a similar type story?
That's a big question. I mean, it's sort of similar, but not.
Well,
Not
I mean, the
really.
circumstances are different, but you've got a black man who's been accused by the white community
Right.
of committing this deed.
I would
In To Kill a
say
Mockingbird, it was murder, wasn't it?
rape.
Rape.
I was going to say that I think Big Boy Leaves Home is more of a parallel,
Wow.
or more and of an apt comparison to Kill a Mockingbird, because in that case, Big Boy didn't do anything to the white woman, just like Tom doesn't in
And To Kill a
In To Kill a
Mockingbird.
Mockingbird. This is, but in both cases, it's what would happen if we didn't have the trial.
Yeah, and the white testimony, even though it's a lie, is taken.
Being taken
Oh,
for fact.
Yeah.
So Wright is sort of dealing with this question of whether or not the characters can see their own positions in these systems. Brother Man sees it very clearly. The black characters generally see it very clearly. Big Boy sees it. He knows what's going to happen to him from the start. Bobo doesn't see it so clearly, and that's why Bobo dies. Brother Man sees it and knows how the story's going to play out, just like we do now. But people like the commander maybe don't see their position, or see it in a very limited way. He still sees himself as a representative of law and justice, but he doesn't see that the law can be racially biased. All he sees is that he is order versus the chaos of the mob, which is what the mayor thinks he is later on in Firing Cloud.